Hi, everybody. Welcome to our fifth webinar in our series. Thank you all for joining us today. I can see many of you have jumped on, so it's great to see some familiar faces back there. I'm glad that everyone's giving us some feedback as well about particular topics that they're finding interesting and things that they want to be hearing more or less about. So today's topic is emotional agility. And I guess this is particularly relevant given the pandemic that we're going through. And I guess, it's something that many people have come to us as an organization, and they're wanting to make sure that they've got some skills and some strategies, not just for themselves as people, but for themselves as leaders. So today, let's talk about emotional agility within ourselves and what this actually looks like. So physically, we know what it means to be flexible or to be agile and to, master box jumps or being able to move in an agile manner. But what does this mean in terms of our emotional approach and our emotional agility? It's a flexible approach that we want to be taking that helps us to respond to conflicts and disappointments, both at work and beyond. So most of us actually allow our very first thought to inform our actions. Okay, whereas emotional agility is where we can actually pause between our thoughts and our actions, and that really allows ourselves to make smarter and more intentional choices before we do things. So how do we hone that mental game? How do we actually develop that emotional agility? First thing we can do is actually feel our feelings and feel what's going on. So studies have shown that when we fight those emotions that we're feeling, it actually makes them stronger. So the key is acknowledging those negative emotions and thoughts without actually letting them define you. All feelings, ones that are both pleasant and unpleasant, are just temporary. So being able to make room for them, allow yourself to move on, will actually give you some strength and some emotional agility. So even if you have a tough day at work, it doesn't mean that you can't have, a great gym class later on. It means that you've got the flexibility to actually act in line with your values rather than what your mood is telling you to do. So it's surprisingly freeing to go through this process. The next thing you can do is think bigger picture. Okay, so imagine you're in a meeting and a colleague takes credit for your idea. So your reaction might actually be to shut them down and to stop contributing. But ask yourself why you're in that meeting in the first place. Is it to get more valuable information? Is it to get credit? Is it to keep connecting with your team and making progress? If you can focus on the bigger picture and focus on your goals and your values, it actually allows you to make more. Next point is be your own friend. So if you're facing a dilemma, it might be a difficult relationship or a challenging work environment, ask yourself what advice you'd offer a friend in that kind of a circumstance. So it might sound simple, but it's really quite incredible what solutions you could come up with when you unhook yourself from your perspective. Alternatively, you could ask yourself what that person who loves you most in the world would suggest. So their advice might actually be kinder than your own inner monologue. Let's talk about this in the context of leadership. So effective leaders, we know, come in many different personalities. They're quiet, they're introverted, and some are loud and challenging. So some leaders intuitively see patterns amidst the complexities of their markets, while others need that really hard data to feel comfortable. Some leaders really thrive on that pressure, fly by the seat of their pants, and others like to carefully plan and schedule and really have things locked down. Even though we've got all of these different personality types, effective leaders actually have one thing in common, and that is their emotional agility. So that's where the leader can read the environment, read those environmental cues, and know what emotional tenure is needed by the employees at a given time. And then they can act on that in alignment with their own values. So how do we do that? How do we make sure that we're emotionally agile leaders? We need to be able to realize that employees are people who need that respect and that support. So let's think about two scenarios, one which shows emotional agility and one where leaders are, running amok. So it might be, emotional agility might be effective behaviours. So, a young, inexperienced shop foreman who leads her manufacturing line through a difficult customer request with tremendous productivity. Or it could be a CEO who graciously accepts feedback from the receptionist after he'd snubbed her during introductions to customers. A troubling development or a troubling approach to leadership might be a technical expert who's actually promoted to a manager but can't lead the team to finish that IT project. Or a brilliant scientist who rolls their eyes and heavily sighs and stops that junior associate's participation in that quality review meeting. Okay, so in reality, we've got real life successes and real life challenges, and that really demonstrates the importance of aligning our emotional responses to the environment to provide that effective leadership. So we can quickly figure out when we're engaging in emotional agility as a leader, when to be thoughtful and encouraging instead of being prescriptive, when to suspend judgment and stay in that learning mode, when to be assertive with ideas, but also at the same time balancing that with our empathy, when to hold back our negative emotions and confidently project optimism. And what we find is that when emotions are managed in a really agile way, and when leaders demonstrate that emotional agility, they can actually use the space between the situation and the response to listen really deeply, and they're more mindful of how they're thinking and how they're feeling, and they're more curious in their learning from others. So when they're ready to act, they lead responsively, and they make sure that leadership is aligned with the values that are important to them, that are important to their team, and they're important to their organization. So that emotional agility helps people to alleviate that stress and reduce the errors that they might be facing, and they're more innovative and improve their performance. So we can train ourselves to be more emotionally agile. So listen, learn, and lead is a phrase that you can hear at times when we're talking about emotional agility. And if you can follow this, it's you'll be well on your way. So listen. So listening to ourselves. So we have up to 16,000 thoughts every single day, but we don't have to respond to every single one of them. Okay, staying in tune with your emotions and your thoughts as they occur, but making a conscious choice to let some of them pass. Again, if those emotions are really strong, think about how they might be affecting people. Analyzing your own core goals and making sure that they're in alignment with your organizational goals as well. The listen to others part, we're often quite quick to judge the thoughts and ideas that other people might bring to the table. And as our judging thoughts kind of race ahead, we quickly prepare our response and never really connect with what's being said. So if we can stay fully present by reducing those distractions, finding some privacy when it's needed, and maintaining eye contact where possible, you keep your body language really open and relaxed so that you're physically ready to receive that communication message. We suspend our judgment long enough to take inventory of what those messages are and what's coming in for us. You might not agree with the thoughts, but do listen. Okay, your goal is to understand what that person's actually saying. Making note of any messages that you hear and actually acknowledging what you're hearing and asking, have I got this right? Do I have it correct? And clarifying until that person, that speaker, is confident that he or she has been heard accurately. Asking that person about what their goals might be. How are they in sync with the stated goals? Okay, it might be a message again that you don't agree with, but at least you've practiced that listening component. The next phase is that learning. So leaders and people must be really open to learning and making sure that they're engaged with that. Otherwise, people can see them at times as closed-minded or arrogant. Okay, so remembering to ask questions that allow for that discovery, making sure that you're able to seek input from all stakeholders, even those on the periphery. So sometimes colleagues can see aspects of our challenges that we might miss because we're too close to a situation. It might be about sharing what you're learning about yourself and the business with your team. So talking about how you learned information and your reasoning. Sometimes executives can grasp concepts really quickly, but what you might find is that they don't explain how they've arrived at that conclusion, and sometimes people can really struggle to keep up. And the last phase of that is lead. Okay, so the only way that people know that you're learning is if you lead based on that learning. What actions are you taking to show that you've heard and that you've learned? What values do you hold most dear? You know, are your actions in line with those values? So keep in mind that verbal communication is critical. People sometimes need to hear something many times before they actually understand what's going on. People need to hear about what your plans are, and research actually shows us that people primarily remember how they feel when you told them rather than what you're actually saying. So it is also about how you're communicating that message. Lead in accordance with your values and your organizational values, and lead by example. People are watching you. Show your progress towards your goals. You know, how are you actually demonstrating that you're working towards those things? Is that posters? Is that videos? Is that emails? How are we doing this given COVID, and making sure that we're maintaining that communication with our teams? Transmit those messages repeatedly, so over and over again. Ask your teams what methods are working best and adjust based on their needs, not based on yours. So emotionally agile leaders will listen and they'll learn before they lead. They stay connected and they're really respected by their employees, by their customers, by their communities. And as more diverse workforces become almost the norm, our emotional agility will help us lead more varied employee groups more effectively. So that's what I wanted to go through today in terms of emotional agility. I hope that I've given you a few key tips to start to practice your own emotional agility. If this is something that you want to hear more about, or you want to talk to us about running something like this for your teams or for your staff, please feel free to get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, send your feedback about any topics that you think are topical, that you want to hear more about from a clinical background. I'd love to hear from you. That's all for today. So have a great day, everybody. You will get sent the link of this webinar as well, so that you've got access to it if you want to recap on any of those comments. Thanks, everyone.